There we go. Hi, MaryKate Maher. How are you?
Hi. Hi.
I'm here tonight in our Thursday series with Artfare. Every Thursday night since March 2020, we've been sitting down with artists. We've been talking to them about their work, their process, their ideas, and lots of times folks are in their studio. And tonight, I'm so happy to have you. I'm Carolina Wheat from Artfare, Curator. As folks are coming in, I welcome you, MaryKate. Where are you right now?
So I'm currently in my studio in Bushwick, and you're seeing the nice side of the studio. I have a couple images you'll see of what my studio actually looks like when I'm working. But there's a couple things in progress behind me.
Nice. And that's one of the things, I think I first saw your work at Spring Break. I know it was like 4 or 5 years ago, 2016, 17, maybe. One of the first I guess Spring Break was earlier than that, but I remember seeing the work and was really attracted to it, not just because of the colors, but the formality and the way that you're using shapes and lights and abstraction, and just had such a sensuality to it. And one of the things that I'm really excited to see more and talk more about is the translation between the two-dimensional work and your 3D work, which I don't think a lot of artists can truly have the competencies that you do in being able to combine both of those together. So just thanks and congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I started off as a painter years and years ago, but I was terrible in terms of like what I thought like a painter should be and how to apply paint, but I always really liked color. And it made more sense for me working in sculpture, but I go back and forth a lot between the 3D and 2D, and a lot of my more recent work as well has like a lot more color involved with it that I think I ignored for a long time. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to work with color.
Yeah, and the sculptures are predominantly freestanding as you're creating, almost totem-like, and I think that you sometimes reference cairns or, this landscape within the objects themselves. And you can kind of feel that sunset or like the landscape and the light within the 2D work as well. And I just like that translation a lot.
Yeah. So they kind of started when I mostly work with sculpture, like there's a lot of layering upon layering. So there's like the idea of landscape as like more like objects and placements of objects. And then within that, there's like little mini landscapes of like things balancing on top of each other and everything being shimmed from beneath and like kind of going upwards. And I always had this relationship with drawing, but it wasn't necessarily, didn't necessarily like marry well with the way that the sculptures were evolving. And so I feel like I've come to this place where they all make sense together, working with the collages and cut paper and even like cut aluminum. Some of the original collages that I started were aluminum with dye bond and dye sublimation prints. And so it was like a way to like work on almost like a slightly like a relief or something that isn't fully like two-dimensional, but was like not completely three-dimensional.
Right.
So like kind of like bridge that world.
Yeah, it's gonna lift it off the wall. I think you have a work on Artfare currently that is the dye sublimation process that is from 2019 or something, Surface Gradient 1.
Yeah, those were some of the, there's like been different incarnations of the surfaces over the years.
Yeah.
And I just keep going with it because I feel like there's just more that I want to understand from them. And then as they keep evolving, they get more and more complicated, or there's different materials that work their way in, and just different ways of kind of using like the same base materials, but just like finding new ways to work with them and new processes of printing, or I just really like materials. So the more things that I can kind of play with and manipulate is what like excites me in the studio.
And well, maybe we can start looking at some slides really quickly, because I'd like to get into the little the nitty gritty of kind of the how you're making in relationship to the prints. You know, what kind of paper you're using, or, you know, kind of like getting into some of the process of using the gradients and the lights. So yeah, if you could share your screen, that would be really cool. There's
Let me make sure I'm doing this right.
the sculpture work behind you is placed so nicely. I love the way the I'm not so sure what the material is, can flopped over like a
oh that's a piece of like faux leather, like a naga hide.
Oh, nice.
Can you see my screen?
No, I cannot.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Okay. We can make this big. I'm on this old laptop, so I feel like it's weird.
I know we were talking before our lovely guests came on that, you know, and tonight there's just so many openings. What were some of the openings that you would have rather enjoyed being at instead of being in front of your computer screen?
Me?
Yeah.
There was a friend has some work at Hesse Flatau group show that just opened. Would have been nice to see, but I'll go see it.
You showed at Hesse Flatau once upon a time too, didn't you? Like a few years ago?
I was just in a show recently.
Oh, Graphophilia.
There was a nice big group show there. Yeah, the Philadelphia.
Graphophilia.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite galleries. Okay, so can we see this? Can you see?
I just see Google.
Oh.
Technical challenges. Maybe it's not the correct screen. Okay. Pull up, share your screen. It should like say, like a lot of different screens will come on, and then it'll be.
Yeah, here we go. Let's try it again. Says I'm screen sharing. Let me pull it up again. Try to have this all worked out.
I know sometimes early on we'll do a little practice. There's been times where I've had to share my own screen because there's been some challenges with hardware and internets, and it says loading.
That's promising.
Hey now.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. So that's me. This is all my info if anyone wants to know more about what I'm doing. So this is my studio.
Yeah.
And all of its glorious chaos.
A busy, productive space.
I do share the space, so it's not all of my, not all me, but everything on the left side is mostly my work. But there's something I really like about, like I'm always working on lots of little things, like bits and bobs, and I guess I basically collage with sculpture as well. And so I'm just always working on the floor and like propping stuff and making these little vignettes of things. So I don't know, it's kind of like the magic, right, in the studio when you see all the like exciting moments where things are in progress and in flux. So.
Definitely. And I'm seeing like some of the materials that you're using in the studio, it's that they're more raw prior to using plaster or paints and other things to give them more of a decorative feel. But what is it, foam that's under a lot of those?
Yeah, there's always foam getting thrown away in the communal area of my studio building. And then there was some foam that I had for projects before, and I try not to throw stuff like that away because it's so terrible for the environment. So whatever I can keep recycling and reusing, I just hoard all these things. So yeah, there's a lot of foam, but I also like foam because you can just roughly sketch out with it,
Yeah.
And so I try to use it, like if I sketch something out, then I'll try to maybe use that as like the interior core of something, or trying to find ways to make it, not go into the trash can.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly appreciate that, and so does Mother Earth. I mean, when you can find creatively your materials and it's serving a couple purposes, I think that's a real win-win, right? Yet, not to mention, I mean, foam is so light too, that when you're moving around sculptures that say are made of wood or giant pieces of plaster, drywall, what have you, it definitely lends itself to easier exhibition opportunities and installations and even sales, I would say. But the surface, say on the one on the right, can you describe a little bit about how you're affixing the objects together? Or if you don't want to give away any secrets, I get it. Or like, how you're treating it.
Sure. So with a lot of these pieces here, I will shape them out of foam, and then I usually coat them with various things to make them more
texture,
like have texture, but also to have like some strength to them. So there's like plasters and aqua resin, things like that. The texture on this side here has like a kind of stippling effect that I did, so it kind of feels almost like if you had like a silk fabric that has that like kind of like texture to it.
Right.
Yeah, I like to just play with the way that different surfaces feel, and so having like something is usually really rough on one side and then probably like smoothed out on another, so there's that like kind of tension between the two.
Mm-hmm. And they're propped in some ways. That are those like wood blocks or stones, or what are you using?
Yeah, this one has like an armature that goes into the floor, but with a lot of my work, and I think on this side I was like propping it up just to hold it in here, but I always like to play with shimming things and like something being hoisted or looking like it's just balancing on this one little point. So yeah, so a lot of times, like when I'm working in the studio in the beginning, I will prop things up with objects that I have in the studio, and then elements of that will like make its way into the final sculpture. So there might be something that like will stay shoved underneath another part in the finished piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I can move that along.
Oh yeah, it's just
so
stunning.
these are like more, these are finished complete sculptures, and this is at a show I had a few years ago at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. So these works are all basically forms of like plaster and resin, and this it's like a concrete polymer that I use. It's almost like if concrete was liquefied and dried like glue.
Mm-hmm.
So you can like coat it on things, almost like a stucco, and then it hardens. So like a lot of the textures are have these like really kind of lumpy, gritty surfaces to them. And then the small moments that have the dye sublimation prints that I use. These are on aluminum, and so then I'll embed those into the sculptures.
Mm-hmm. And the one to the right that has a gradient from dark to light, that one is entitled Viewfinder, and that is on Artfare.
Yeah, this one is on Artfare.
That's great. And the work is already has, you know, showing history that it was at PAFA, which is incredible to have a museum show. That was your first museum show?
Yeah, PAFA was. It was nice to be invited back because I got my MFA there. And yeah, they're trying to kind of beef up their alumni association. And so this was a nice 3-person alumni show.
That's a very smart strategy for their development and student services, kind of administrative collaborations. Yeah.
But it was nice, you know, they like went all out. it was nice.
Did they acquire a work, may I ask?
They did not.
Oh,
not yet. We'll see. Maybe.
Well, it's such an honor to have that opportunity to be showing. I know some folks, you know, wait till they're in their 50s before they have their first museum kind of piece or recognition, for that matter. So it's quite an honor. And you have such a fantastic record of showing too. I was, you know, really excited looking at your CV, just kind of shaking my head and saying that she did everything right. You know, so many folks ask these questions like, how do I make it, you know, in the art world, or what do I do? And well, first it's always be ready, right? And always be ready to invite someone to your studio, always be making and prepared. Yet to kind of see the trajectory of being in a lot of group shows, doing a few residencies and applying for grants, and then just, you know, a real focus, a nonstop focus of exhibition history led to more solo shows, which led to, you know, something as honorable as this, and being in this group show is really fantastic. The balancing act you've got going on there too, I wanted to address, because you mentioned balance, yet you also within a few of your statements and otherwise concepts, you're very engaged with the landscape. And I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about that preoccupation within these sculptural works.
Sure, yeah. So I use the term landscape, but for me, it kind of means many different types of landscapes. A lot of my initial work was more influenced by the kind of post-industrial landscape, specifically where my studio, I've mostly had a studio in Brooklyn, usually in industrial neighborhoods. And so what that landscape was like compared to other landscapes that influenced me, like beautiful desert, you know, you're kind of like California desert, or Icelandic tundra, like things like that, that are just all these versions of extremes that have beautiful kind of color palettes and these really harsh relationships to like shapes and forms and light. And so I like to pull from all of that. So there'll be like little elements of the way like the light, the way I'll remember the light was like hitting something, and then I'll try to recreate that. But because I'm trying to recreate something that is so natural, it's kind of futile to try to do that. So it's like my attempt in like, what would my version of that be? And so playing with, like, even in this sculpture here, Viewfinder, that's the one on Artfare, like this idea of rock formations and balancing rocks or elements that are eroded. And then how do you make that into a sculpture? So it's like kind of playing with those different things. And then within the context of sculpture itself, well, what's a pedestal? There's like a little thing here that's on top of the pedestal. What's a rock? You know, I can make a rock out of anything. I've made rocks out of tin foil and shoved them under other elements. And so it's just kind of like these cyclical, it's kind of like all going back in on itself of like, what is this landscape and what is this form? And then introducing, you know, those moments where, is this a hole? Is this a surface? There's a print that's embedded. The visual of the print is a void, but it has a flat surface. So then it becomes a positive, you know, so going back and forth with what are you understanding when you're looking at the work?
Mm-hmm.
I can move ahead to one that.
Yeah.
These were some other works from that show. And there's like, so all of these are about 5 to 6 feet tall. So they're kind of the size of my body. And they feel very human-like in a way when you're next to them in the space. And so like something like this is a dye sublimation print on aluminum that is embedded into the sculpture. So your understanding of like, is it vibrating? Is it cut away into the sculpture? Like all these little elements make it have this like tension on the surface of like what is in the foreground, what's in the background as you move around the work.
Yeah, they do feel really anthropomorphic, as you were kind of mentioning, almost as you were talking about like extreme landscapes like the tundra. You know, obviously abstractions are going to feed, you know, your brain's going to want to try to make, you know, it reference something, right? A lot of times it's like, this really feels like a pelican or a bird or a penguin somehow in the space. I appreciate too the gray floor with this off-white grayness and the way that the works are actually in this space. The way the actual exhibition looks is really clean. And another thing I wanted to address is the stacking. You mentioned stacking, and you know, I think whether it's Ugo Rondone or other artists that reference the totem in the work, seeing you grasping for, you know, kind of these extreme landscapes. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about those elements, the abstract elements in stacking and how that's important to your concept.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of those things where it was like, it kind of just started organically. And I don't remember the first piece that I did where I was starting to stack, but it just became these moments of combining all of these different objects together, and the temporary fix while I'm working in the studio of like shimming and propping and holding. And then from that, just seeing like, oh, well, how far can that go? How far can that go? And how can I bring that like tension into the work? And so, yeah, whenever I like travel, I just love to take photos of, you know, just random landscapes and things that I see. And in a lot of places, there's always, you know, like eroded rocks where they're like balancing awkwardly on top of something else, or even just hikers like leaving their little cairns and stuff around. And so I just kind of like these, there's repetition of that where you see that all the time, you start to see it all the time. And then, you know, it even goes back to like when I doodle, like if you're talking on the phone and you're just like scribbling, like I'm just always like building things upwards. And I think it's just like one of those like patterns within my body that I just like to do all the time. And so like, why not incorporate that into my work? And on like another funny side note, I've been having like lots of skeletal issues this year and having to see like doctors for like pinched nerves and things. And they're basically like, oh yeah, your whole body's like way off whack. You've been like, we had to shim you. I have a shim in my foot right now in my shoe because I've been like off balance for half of my life. And so it's just kind of like, oh, that's just like my work in the studio. I understand.
Wow. Your body is informing your practice.
Yeah, I think it's just like this thing within me that I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, you said a funny side note. I don't know if it's that funny, but it is quite, interesting. Yeah. Are you experiencing like massive pain in like your neck or like your nervous system? Like you said, slip discs sound crazy.
Yeah, it's luckily like I'm getting treatment for it now, so it's not so painful, but it was like, yeah, it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. Yeah. Maybe it's old age, but it's just
old age. I don't know.
So these are some other sculptures that are smaller scale. I've been trying to work. So usually I work really large. I feel like I just always want to go bigger and bigger. And then I was like, okay, well, this isn't always practical. And I, not like challenging myself, but it was always harder for me to make smaller work. And so I started to try to focus on that more. And so these are all, like pedestal size works. And then still playing with, using like this side here is a dye sublimation print. So it looks like there's a hole in here, but it's actually all a flat surface. And then this piece over here has a hole in it. And then I feel like this is like more of like a formal thinking about rocks and landscape. And there's like this little balancing rock up here.
Is that on a brass like platform?
Yeah, it's like on this little brass. I guess it maybe would be something that you would use for, I don't know if it's like for jewelry display or something, but it's just, yeah, like a maybe 12 by 12 square of brass.
And so it's just a combination then, these works, wood, foam, the dye sublimation prints, all kind of coming together, and that frustration, as you kind of mentioned. Are you, and they're all affixed. There is, say for instance, no real balancing act. The small rock type structure on the right hand work, that's saying it's stuck there, right? Or is it balancing?
Yeah, I mean, it is loose, but I usually will tack it down,
right,
with museum wax or something like that. Because I like the idea that it could be portable, that you could move it around. But yeah, most of this is all fixed. There's been times where I've tried to only use the weight of the work, but I feel like it's too stressful. Like if I have to have it at a show, a show like that, I don't know. I feel like I need to like shore it up somehow, and then have smaller elements that are maybe loose, but not in a way that's gonna damage the work. Or and so these are some of the metal collages that I was doing, cutting out the aluminum that had the dye sublimation prints on them. And then I would sort of collage other elements in there. So on the left, there's pieces of plaster that are affixed to it. And the one on the right has paper as well mixed in with it. So it has these like, the way that the prints on the aluminum are, like, they're not completely matte. They have a little bit of a sheen to them. but then the paper or the dye bond or other things I'll use usually are more matte. So there's this like, almost like a velvety, you know, like texture to it.
Yeah. Now, I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more about maybe some of our audience members don't know exactly what a dye sublimation print is.
Yeah, it's one of the many types of printing that's out there now where there's like a special coating on, I know they do it a lot on metal. I think you might be able to do it on other substrates, but I'm not really sure. But it usually has this coating on it that's like a resin coating, and then they bake the image onto the surface. So it's not like it's just glued onto it as if you had like your photograph or something backed with metal. It's like there's like a chemical process where they bond together. So like in this one on the right, this little part here was where part of that image delaminated and it kind of broke off, almost like if it was like an enamel coating on cookware or something where it's like really thick. But I liked that. I liked sort of how it left that area revealed. So I left it in the collage. But yeah, when you see how it's done, and I was a couple of years ago, I was invited. There was a print shop that was in Williamsburg that's not there anymore, called Little Metal Print, and they wanted to do a show with an artist who was using dye sublimation prints. And I was like, me, please, like that's what I've been doing. Let me do a show with you, because then they let me use their facilities to print.
Nice.
And so I got to see like behind the scenes, like how it works. Because usually I just send it out, I outsource it, and it gets sent back to me. But there I got to see how they did it all. So I could nerd out a little bit on. It's almost like making a t-shirt where you like press it down in the machine and the heat transfers it on there, and then you know, lift it up and then you have your print. But I like with the aluminum that I could cut them on the saw and cut out different shapes and forms and then collage with it. And you don't need a frame with it. It doesn't need to be behind glass because it's pretty durable to dust and fingerprints and things like that. So
and UV resistance, or
yeah, I mean, I think so. I don't know if they've tested it like, you know, for like 50 years or something, because it's fairly new, but it's supposed to be, yeah, UV and pretty durable. So.
And the image then comes from where, MaryKate? Your gradients, and you know, where are you working these from?
Yeah, they started on a residency. I forget how many years ago. I was at Yaddo on a residency, and usually when I get sort of like stuck in the studio, I just take a camera and like take photographs of things that I'm working on, just to sort of like look at them removed from, you know, in person. And I was just shooting stuff with my camera and playing around with my lens, and I made this weird orb kind of gradient shape, like photograph, I guess we'll call it. And I was like, oh, that's fun. So I just printed it out. I brought like a little inkjet printer with me, and I was just printing it out. And I just really liked how it had, this like the dark outlines, and this, it almost looked like it was vibrating just from the, you know, the way that the palette of it was just radiating into the middle. And so I was like, oh, this is cool. And so I think I just like stuck it on something that I was working on there. And then I've just been using it ever since, but I've been manipulating it in all these different ways. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's like all these possibilities with it that I just keep exploring. And yeah, so it's basically like an image of nothing.
Right.
But it's like light and shadow and just contour and all these things that are sort of nebulous, but then they form all these different objects or shapes, and you can kind of make them feel like they're solid, you know. It's I don't
so it's one, you know, really happy consequence with, you know, the shot, and that has been manipulated over and over and over again in all of these surface works, right? The title of these are called the surface works.
Yeah, and these, the paper, so these are kind of the start of the paper collages.
Yeah.
They basically started last year when New York shut down for the pandemic, and I was basically just like at home with whatever. I had come back from a residency, and I just had some like folders of paper and stuff in my apartment still. And so I was like, okay, well, I got to do something. And so I just started playing around with them. And then from that, like it just was originally just an exercise to do something creative while we were just all home, like scared, like not knowing what to do.
You know,
and then
it was really hard to get anything out. So congrats on just being able to hunker down and do anything, no matter whether it was going to go anywhere or not. And that was kind of the gift you had to give yourself, right? Just basically, like, this doesn't matter. I'm just doing it to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Just to stay sane and just feel like, you know, I have to keep my hands busy to do something.
That's right.
But then it was like one of those nice little, I don't want to say accident, because they were already kind of going there in a way, but it was just like a nice, I guess, like tangent in another way of working. Like, oh, you know, paper, it's so much easier than sculpture.
Yeah.
I can do it at home on my floor if I need to. And it was a lot of fun just letting myself work quickly and just kind of sketching in this way. And then using color. I mean, the color in these are way more vibrant and colorful than like anything I would have thought I would be doing.
Yeah.
Most of them started with this like kind of pink and fuchsia tones, because that was the papers that I had at the time. And then from that, like they've evolved into different, all different, you know, colors. And then just, I guess some of the fun is approaching these in ways where maybe I'm only approaching it in color, like I'm only looking at color values and hues together, or I'm building shapes. It's like a different way of working than how my brain usually works when I'm making sculpture. And so I think that's kind of like refreshing. Like I think I just needed something to like shake things up a little bit, to let my brain like learn something new.
Yeah, and they are reminiscent of, and they're certainly much more sophisticated and sensuous than what I'm about to say. They kind of remind me a little of some of the color studies that I had to do in my color class for my undergraduate BFA or whatnot. But I mean, clearly are well beyond, you know, whether you're combining this like really nice complementary presentation on the right, the tint of the blue with the heavier orange, and then like the darker brown orange, the way that the colors are working. My main thing to say is obviously it's this re-exercise. It's like this attunement to how you can play with color and how color works together, far be it from just like more monochromatic or tertiary color scheme, just kind of like a reawakening or invigoration of some of the stuff that you already know, but that still practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. yeah, it's just been like, I don't know, this fun exercise, um, but then turning it into, you know, finished works that I'm like, oh, I can like use it to express and like hash out different compositions and ideas that would never really exist in my sculptural work, but yet they can inform each other. And so it's like finding the way to take certain elements and certain maybe like line work or things like that I am interested in that wind up being in the collages, and then trying to find a way to make that happen in the three-dimensional sculpture, which is like hard and tricky, but kind of like a good challenge to figure out how to, you know, have that be able to like work its way back in so that they.
Oh yeah, I could see how that would be a great challenge. I mean, these have space to them, right? And this the clear foreground, background, and then like references to some, you know, dreamy place.
Yeah, they are. They're very like shaman-y, kind of trippy and stuff. Yeah, it's funny because they have space, but like no space in terms of, you know.
Right.
And I think a lot of that too was like me being stuck inside for so long, and space was so compressed, and like what does space even mean to me anymore? Like how does my body even understand?
Right. Yeah, and that color palette back there was much more, you know, muddy is not the nice word, but it just as it's the hues have that a little bit more of that darkness, kind of gray feeling in relationship to previous more bright and as you may say, or I may say, happy colors, or really your face colors, like these muted colors add to that kind of at the end of COVID feeling.
So then I was like, okay, well, let me work on some sculptures that are related now to the way that I've been working on the collages.
Nice.
And so these are also smaller scale. And yeah, I just sort of started approaching these sculptures the way that I was working on the collages, where I'm just like cutting out lots of different pieces of materials and just, you know, manipulating them in different ways to find the composition that I really like that works out. But with the sculptures, like they can feel more awkward and have those moments of tension that don't really exist in the collages. So these are both, again, like different materials. There's this little yellow piece is cast glass. That's kind of like a rounded sort of shim. And this is the concrete polymer material that I was talking about. And then these are dye sublimation prints on dye bond that are cut out. This one over here, the bluish one, has cast hydrocal, and then like I airbrushed part of this blue area, and then there's a dye sublimation print here. So there's like lots of things collaged on top of each other.
And these are shots clearly of the front. However, do you have the reverse image, or do you have images of the back, or you know?
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of think of these as two-sided sculptures. They pretty much mimic each other on the front and back. But it's like when you see them on the sides that they almost disappear. They become, you know, they're just like these little slivers when you visually see them on the side.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Elegant.
And so these are all in a show back in January at Gold Scopophila in Montclair, New Jersey. But you can kind of see here, so like the purple sculpture here from the front, you can see it, but then on the side, you can see how it's kind of like skinny here.
Yeah, it's really graceful.
Yeah. So as you walk around them, they kind of shrink and grow. And then how they sort of mimic and twin with the wall work. So you'll see like the little eyes almost like repeating throughout the space.
Truly.
And then these are some other newer collages that I've been working on. So there's a lot of twinning. Like I'll kind of going back to the doodling where I'm like trying to figure out, okay, what is this shape? Where is it going? Like I'm gonna do it here and do it over here and try to like figure out these conversations that they're happening. And with these, I was thinking also about they're flat, but if I'm thinking about space and they're on these sort of like pedestals or tabletops, like these objects are, you know, resting on something, but maybe over here, it seems like it would be an object, but then it just becomes like more of a shape instead of a form. And then
moments where you're coming out of the frame, like that on the right, it really lends itself to that lead to your practice in sculpture as well, you know, just kind of getting out of that frame and pushing yourself into the three-dimensional world. I really do find it interesting too, MaryKate, that you had said like, well, I think if there's like a front and a back, and then like the side is very skinny, like because, you know, sculpture is really challenging for folks that have more of a two-dimensional kind of practice, or, you know, and being able to explore sculpture the way that you're exploring it and doing it well, you know, the way that those works looked in that installation shot with the two sculptures and the two works, it just feels so unanimous. You know, it feels like it's coming from the same person. It's really, I mentioned already earlier, which is almost as if you've been able to truly visually communicate these two-dimensional works almost coming off the wall. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I feel like it's been like, you know, decades of trying to get to that point, and then you still wonder, like, is it there? You know, where's it going? You know.
Yeah, and you know, hi SP Harper is mentioning, and I agree, and I think other critics or art writers have even alluded to Brancusi in some of your work, or De Chirico in some of your works. It's highly flattering. It's wonderful. And I'm wondering, do you reference, or are there any contemporaries that you would consider yourself kind of referencing or in conversation with? I can think of a few, but I'm wondering, like, who are you, you know, kind of eyeing right now that's alive? And
yeah, I also have a couple slides at the end of like people that
I love it.
Interested in right now. I can skip ahead if you want.
That's okay. We'll get there.
Okay. But like Brancusi is definitely, I mean, I feel like his work was so amazing. Everything from like the pedestal to the work on top of it. Like there's just such a like power about his work that, yeah, I mean, I don't set out to try to make Brancusi-esque stuff, but every now and then I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of looks like a Brancusi shape.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I think I just keep working with the circle and then cutting it, or the oval and then like cutting it. So there's lots of these like semicircle oval shapes, and they feel very bodily in these ways that I'm always like, you know, there's like the feminine and the masculine like lines of them. And
I definitely see and hear that femininity within the work. I mean, I've even been a culprit of saying words like elegance, graceful, sensual. You know, like these words that are described lots of times describe females' work. But I think that sculptures do lend themselves to that kind of formalism that provides, you know, this suave grace that it deserves.
yeah, I mean, a lot of my work is so kind of like gruff and dirty and not always very sexy that it's nice to sometimes have those moments where you're like, oh, this is really like a really sensual, sexy form. Like, yeah, that's good. I like it, you know, and having that work with maybe its counterpart, which is a little more like messy and slumpy.
Right. Well, it is refined. It's totally polished. I mean, you can tell you have a very clean hands, even though your studio is a mess. No, I'm just kidding.
Let me see what else I have on here. Okay, so this one feels very kind of Brancusi like.
Oh, yeah.
So this is work that's up right now at Mocha Westport in Connecticut.
Great.
It's this really nice, like pretty new contemporary art museum. I think this is a group show called Elan Vital that has a lot of different artists in it. And I think it's their third show that they've had since they opened. But it was nice. I got to show a series of collages, and then there's this sculpture here, as well as the other two smaller ones that I showed a couple slides back that were also in the Gold Sculpophilia gallery. But yeah, so like with this sculpture, it's very elegant in this way. It's very like it feels kind of more delicate than a lot of the other sculptures that I've done. And the treatment of it, I kind of went wackadoo with it, and I like coated it with gold leaf and then painted over it, and then I sanded away the paint so you can see the gold leaf coming through, and it's like but it's also like kind of hideous in parts because it has like so many layers of like abrasion happening. I sort of like that it had this like elegance and also kind of crudity to it. And then this part here is like it's airbrushed onto, so it's aluminum that had a print on it, and then they airbrushed over it. And so the front and the back are basically the same. Same image. And then these are some artists. Yeah. I mean, there's so many artists that are doing awesome, inspiring work. And I feel like, I don't know if it's like when you're just on one tangent, you just start to see other people who you're like, oh yeah, they're doing something similar. Like, I like that and I like that. But Jonathan Chaplin, I just really like the way that he's like almost collaging.
Yeah.
And using like space and color and everything.
Can definitely see it.
Yeah. And then of course, Louise Nevelson, who is kind of like the godmother of collaging.
Classic. One of our guests, Chancey Rackett, says, loving this Sophie Tauber ARP energy, whom I didn't even think of. It really makes sense.
Yeah, and it's also like there's also all these painters that I've kind of been influenced by, like older kind of spiritualists and abstract painters. I don't know, it's been like this really awakening, but also like overwhelming year of like, what am I doing? Who am I doing? Like, who am I becoming in the studio right now? Because I have
you like, and everyone else, yeah,
new little tangents, you know, happening.
You know, I was also thinking a little of Carolyn Salas.
Yeah, Carolyn's a friend of mine. I love her work. Yeah.
Oh, love her work so much. I mean, strip, the color and, other things away, but some of these kind of front back, then that thin kind of the way that she's basically presenting the sculptures. Also, they can be outdoors or otherwise. I wonder would you consider making work that's environment proof? You got Louise Nevelson on the right, so I figured.
Yeah. I have made some public works. Yeah, I mean, I had some proposals, so maybe there'll be another one in the future. We'll see what happens. But
very cool.
Yeah, there are a couple out there.
Mm.
Oh yeah, Ruth Duckworth. Her work
is
pretty amazing. She works more in ceramic. And then this last image is just like a weird rock formation that I'm always like influenced by all of those.
Yeah, those are fascinating. I think also it's fascinating too. We've referenced the cairn or the cairn, or I'm not so sure exactly how to pronounce it, but the memory of humans traveling and kind of looking at the work that you're creating and taking these kind of surreal two-dimensional spaces and formed with light and gradient, and translating that into these landscapes as you would that would be rough terrain or just unusually traveled, non-traveled, maybe not even documented, but just that idea of the cairn and our or humans travel or placements, or the fact that someone was there, right? And that cairn is made for direction, that cairn is made to let folks know that they have, made it this far, or to hide food, or all these other uses, I guess, over the years. And so I really would love to see your work be more out there in the environment, in the public, because it has these layered meanings to it already.
Yeah. And the other thing about cairns that I like is like, there's like this slow hand involvement with them, like that act of like putting everything together carefully, and like painstakingly to keep it when you can't just like throw them together, it has to be kind of labored over in this way.
Right, but also to prove you were there for a viewer. It's for someone else, but it's mostly for you at that moment.
Yeah.
I really love that. And I know we're coming up already on our 1900 hours, so it's almost 7. And I don't know if you had any last words. I'm certainly thankful that you spent your Thursday evening with us. Not an opening.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for everyone that showed up tonight. If you miss any of the talk, it'll be up on YouTube the next few days. And check out MaryKate's work on the Artfare app and online. It's looking really beautiful, and they're very reasonable. The prints are $450. We just did the drop this week. And then you have some of the earlier works and a sculpture on there too. So I hope everyone can check it out, and maybe you get one for your own wall.
Yeah, I wanted to, for the prints, it was nice that I could make them affordable, because I know for me, like I like to collect work, but I can never afford, over a certain price point. And so I know we've all been staring at our walls all year, like I need more art, or
true. I have such a habit of collecting. It's hard not to, but it's a really good price point. And they're like 11 by 9. So they're not, little mini things. They're kind of a nice size too. Well, there it is. Thank you again, MaryKate.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Hope to see you sometime in the summer sun, if not in the fall. Take it easy and Peace.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.